Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second and final episode of the 2021 PAC Basketball Preview Show. I'm Rob McKinney alongside PAC contributor and broadcaster Jared Barton. Our final preseason show is centered around the men's conference, but before we discuss teams, we want to inform you that each PAC team, men's and women's, will have at least 2 games covered by our network. And if you missed last episode, there were some league changes this year because of COVID. Some key takeaways that we discussed last episode was that the teams will have staggered starts. Not everybody's going to start at the same time. And they're going to be expecting some postponed games, maybe some cancellations. And we really just ask for everybody's patience with that. And then finally, all teams will make the PAC tournament. And so that's pretty exciting. You know, you have some of these teams that come in that may not have the best of luck throughout the regular season, but you never know what's going to happen come PAC tournament time. We could see a Cinderella story this year. But now that we have covered pretty much all the necessary topics, we are going to discuss teams, key players, and our outlook on the season. And again, I'm pleased to welcome in Jared Barton. And Jared, we'll start off with the team preview of the Waynesburg University Yellow Jackets.
Yeah, it sounds good. Waynesburg coming off of what you wouldn't say exactly a great season down in Greene County. But they're obviously looking to turn the tide down there. One big piece who really missed most of the year, as you know very well, Rob, is Matt Popek, and someone who only played 2 games, started both of those games, but ended up going and getting a season-ending injury. So because of that, he's back again and should be at full health and should be able to lead this team. In terms of other people who are gone, the biggest people that they've lost, Sam Heater, Brendan Smith, and Cam Auld, 3 players who pretty much were in there the entire time, at least starting-wise, for the Yellow Jackets. So going to replace that, including the people that started all 26 games, is not going to be an easy thing to do. Although you look at their roster, they have a lot of young players. And because of that, who knows exactly what some of these freshman players will be able to do for Waynesburg to start out the season. Now, of course, there are some returning contributors that we're expected to see some good stuff from, including Ryan Feldberg, the sophomore, who had averaged about 7 points a game last year, was also a 2-time PAC Rookie of the Week. And because of that, you know, he's most likely going to step up into a little bit of a leadership role coming into his second season with the Yellow Jackets. Isaiah Alonso is another player who I am looking out for. He was a second-team PAC player at the end of the year. He led the team in points per game, rebounds per game, and also total blocks. So because of that, he's probably going to be one of your biggest contributors offensively, and we're excited to see what Alonso can bring to the field. Zach Ford, also the junior, is another player. He only had 1 start last year, but you're looking, he's probably going to be starting in the top 5 for most of these games as long as he stays healthy. But as I mentioned, a young team, 11 freshmen, 3 sophomores, and just 7 juniors. The only senior on the team is Popek. And because of that, it's going to be very interesting to see what a one-man band in terms of a senior leader is going to be able to contribute. Of course, he has been a very, very good player in the past, all PAC second team in the 2018-2019 season. And as I mentioned, the only senior on the roster. So I'm excited to see what they can do. Waynesburg with wins last year, as we mentioned, they only had a few, 6 of them. And because of that, some of the PAC teams that they ended up getting victories over were Geneva, W&J, St. Vincent in overtime, Teal twice, including once in overtime, and then Bethany. Because of that, they're going to go and have to build on that. You know, there were some teams in there that were decent, including W&J and St. Vincent, who were right around the middle of the pack. So I'm excited to see how they're going to build on the wins that they had last year against teams that were in the tournament, as well as going and trying to pull up some upsets, because they're going to have to if they want to climb the standings coming into 2021.
Yeah, Jared, I love seeing young teams, especially with a newer coach. You know, we had Mark Christner there, and now with him not being there for this would be the second year. You know, you can add the pieces that you want. You can sort of get the players that you want to fit your scheme and your style. And I think Matt Popek as a leader, even though he didn't play very much at all last year, I think he is such a threat to score, a tremendous leader. And I think this young team is going to rally behind him. And I'm expecting this team to probably be a surprise. I think you're going to look at them and say they're too young, but I think they got a lot of talent. The freshmen are going to add a lot, and Alonso's a beast down low. So, you know, we'll see how the Yellow Jackets will do this year. But Moving on, we'll talk about the Teal Tomcats. They were 6-18 overall last year, Jared, 5-11 in the PAC. They added 6 freshmen, but Jared, here's the problem with this squad last year. Defense was an issue. They allowed 76 points per game compared to 67 points scored. And when you're outscored by 9 points a game, obviously it's tough to win. So they did muscle out 5 wins in the conference, but defense was certainly an issue for them. And watching this team in years past, the Tomcats thrived on their athleticism and the pure skill that they offered. And they had a lot of really talented shooters, a lot of guys that can dunk the ball, that can play down low. But this is an extremely young team this year. And I'm excited to see what they're going to do to bounce back from the previous year and see if defense is at the forefront. But they did out-rebound other teams. They averaged about 7 rebounds a game more than their opponents. And I think that speaks to their athleticism and the size that they have between the blocks. And with that young core, I mean, you would probably agree with me. Teal was just a fun team to watch.
Oh, yeah.
You love to announce for them. You love the flashy plays, but they're a team that can beat anybody in the conference. Despite that record, they can come out and really, if they're on, they're on. But they lost in the first round of the PAC playoffs last year, Jared, 76-62. And they were lucky to make the tournament with some of the struggles that they had. However, they put up a decent fight in the end. But they're led by Chima Omehe. And he's going to be really the stud for them scoring. He had 11.2 points per game last year, averaged around 21 minutes per game, 49% from the field, 8 rebounds per game, and shot 53% at the line. So that's obviously something he'd like to improve upon. But from an athleticism standpoint, and from shooting the ball and distributing and playing with a lot of speed, this is an individual that could really take off this year. And we also have Ahmad Tajimallah, who stands at 6'8". So he's going to be their big down low, averaged about 11.5 points per game, 28 minutes per game as well, 43% from the field. And he averaged just around 10 rebounds per game, just underneath that. So just underneath the double-double per game. And, again, with the Tomcats, they always seem to have size down low year in and year out. And I think he's really going to come on. And one guy who I really enjoy announcing for over the years has been Simmons. He's returning back for the Tomcats, 31 minutes per game, only played in 17 games last year, didn't have a lot of action, but he did average 9.4 points per game when he came in, and 37% from 3-point range. So he's a guy that can shoot the three. But for the Tomcats, Jared, they lost a couple key pieces, and they lost Michael Ricks, who was their leading scorer, averaged about 13 points per game, 31 minutes per game for him, 47% from the field, and 49% from three. So they lost their most lethal 3-point shooter. But, this team is still going to have, we mentioned Simmons and a couple other pieces that can sort of make up for that. But, he was a true leader, and he put up a lot of points when it mattered most. And they also lost a great facilitator, and Nairi Gosley led the team in minutes, 32 per game, and also 9.7 points per game, and led the team in assists. So when you lose your key contributor, somebody who can, dish the rock and, sort of leads that offense, that's a piece that's going to be missing. And I'm interested to see who is going to come in and step up for the Tomcats. But, looking for a better season from them despite the key losses. And moving on now, Jared, we'll talk about the Washington and Jefferson Presidents.
Yeah, the Presidents, one of the better teams in the PAC last year as they finished in the top 5. And I got to see them a couple of times in action, which is actually pretty nice because in terms of the men's contest, I didn't see too many of them in the 2020 campaign. So getting to see them last year was a breath of fresh air, if you will, because they were actually in a lot of the games that they played. Now, one thing that I like to point out, of course, is the overall season record, 14-12. But because of that, they did make the PAC tournament, losing to Geneva in the quarterfinal of the tournament. And obviously, that's not exactly a little problem, or a big problem, I should say, because Geneva ended up making it all the way to the championship. So they were on a run, which is it's formidable. It's fine, And W&J, I look at it like this: they do have some losses, but they bring back a lot of returners who were key contributors last year. We'll start though with some of the people who were gone, and I really don't think that it's going. Look, these people are important. The biggest one for me is Jonathan Devito, who was their point guard and was really a spark player last year. So him running the point, you got to go and find your guy who's going to be leading your offense again. But really, other than that, there weren't many two big names that are gone off of this list. And now you roll down the list of the starters, and really, it's pretty incredible. We're talking about two guys who played in every single game in Okikiola Agabale, who was a very exciting player down low last year, leading the team in rebounds. And then Zach Queen, who was also going to be a senior this year and played in every game and started in every game. AJ Blue played in every game, only had 3 starts, should be coming back as a key contributor. And important to mention, Agabale and Queen, the only 2 players to start every game last year, if I didn't make that apparent already. But Cameron Seaman, Alexander Skowron, those are 2 guys that I'm looking to see step up. They played in most games last year. Skowron didn't get a start, but he was in every contest and led the team in field goal percentage, also blocks as well with 27. Meanwhile, Seaman was all PAC second-team player for the second straight season. So obviously having him back with this already experienced roster is going to be pretty interesting to see how he's going to go. Maybe he makes a first-team knock campaign here in 2021. Kyron Mitchell is another guy who is coming back and was a key contributor last year as a freshman. He's a sophomore now, starting 10 of the contests that they played in. And then Primo Zini, another player, a junior, who was also in most of those games, 17 starts out of 26 appearances. So we'll see exactly what goes for what is a long cast of returners, which will only benefit the Presidents, I think, in this year. Look for them. For me, they're probably going to have a chance to finish in the top 3 in some fame or fashion, and because of that, should have a decent opportunity in the postseason. Now, there is one newcomer. There's a lot of newcomers. They do have a decent amount of freshmen and players who didn't play last year, but one newcomer to keep an eye on if he's able to go and actually get some start time or even some time off the bench would be freshman Blaine Gartley, who was a person that I saw personally last year a lot, as he was a point guard for the Mount Lebanon Blue Devils in the WPIAL. And he was really an electric player on a team that probably had a chance to win the state championship. But unfortunately, because of the COVID shutdown across the state, they never had an opportunity to get through the PIAA tournament. So excited to see his name on this roster now. And he's a smaller guy, but that doesn't matter because he packs a lot of talent. And I'm excited to see what they're going to do. They're in action on February 6th for the first time. As long as everything stands, they'll be on the road against Chatham. So I'm excited about what the Presidents could bring to the conference this year. And I'd look for them to be definitely one of the top contenders.
Yeah, Jared, a few years back, if you can remember, I mean, this is a team that struggled to get a win, yep. And then they really turned it around. They had some electrifying shooters. I mean, there was one game in particular that we covered on the PAC Sports Network at Waynesburg, and they couldn't miss from beyond the arc. And then right. it was almost like you saw it in that game, a turning point with them to now they've had some sustained success over the last couple of years, looking for more of that this year. So Jared, thank you for that. And we'll move on now to the Westminster Titans, 16-12 overall, 10-6 in the PAC. Last year, they added 7 freshmen. So they averaged about 76 points per game. But the key note for them is that they out-rebounded teams by 5 or more rebounds per game last year. So they used their height and their athleticism, obviously, to their advantage. And I'll go over a couple really key impact players that led to that, and some of them that they lost, and they're certainly going to miss. But they lost in the quarterfinals last year to St. Vincent, 88-78. We will cover the Bearcats. But, they're going to be led by Isaac Stamatiadis this year. Probably one of the coolest names to say in the PAC. And as an announcer, you love those names, but at the same time, they can be a little bit tricky. However, I think we were able to get that one down, and we have to because he's an extremely important player for this Titans team. 15 points per game last year, led the team in minutes with 31 minutes. One of 2 guys to play in every game last year. So Stamatiadis, he is going to be he's going to be huge for them. And he's somebody who can get rebounds, who can shoot. He's got a tremendous field goal percentage, over 40%. And, I think with him as your leader offensively and defensively, this team is going to be right in the mix of things. Again, this season. And another player to look out for would be Daniel Ritter. Led the team in three-pointers last year, second on the team in three-point average at 42% from beyond the arc, and averaged about 11 points per game. So when you have somebody down low like Stamatiadis, you have somebody who can shoot from beyond the arc. You have two of the most important pieces in my mind in the PAC to sort of make a run in the tournament as the season concludes. But we could see more action from Josh Hutcherson. He's someone to look out for. Started 3 games and averaged 5 points per game. Second on the team in field goal percentage at 53%. So didn't play a ton, but when he got in, it mattered. Also look for Clay Odell. Didn't start in any games, but did play in 22, 4.5 points per game. And then Austin O'Hara, who is Dylan O'Hara's little brother. He could certainly make a splash. Did play in 27 games, averaged about 3 points per game. But if he turns into anything like his brother did for that program, then they're going to be in luck, because, Austin O'Hara had some flashes last year when we announced for them, and Dylan O'Hara, we'll get to him in a second, is a really big loss for them. But, having the younger brother to come in and sort of take that role, is very important for the Titans. And I'm excited to see how Austin O'Hara can sort of step into his older brother Dylan's shoes for the Titans this season. But mentioning their losses, 5 starters and regulars lost for this program. It's going to be a tough pill to swallow. However, I think this is a team that is well constructed, and I think is still going to have success despite the losses that they had. Key loss, obviously, Dylan O'Hara, as we mentioned, 18 points per game, 40% from 3-point range, and 47% from the field. So, he made the big shots. That's the most important thing. He made the shots when it mattered most. They're also going to miss Blake Payne, who was just an absolute beast. One of the most muscular human beings I've ever seen play in a PAC matchup. And he's a big dude that was physical down low, and his defense will definitely be missed. Averaged about 10.4 points per game, Jared, 6 rebounds per game, 17 blocks, and 53% shooting. So he was automatic, it seemed like. And, he just was physical and made everybody else look like high schoolers out there. And I think that's certainly something that they will miss moving forward into this season and beyond. They're also going to miss Preston Stitt, Lloyd Chapman. Both those guys, had some solid time playing, averaged about 3 points per game, each of them, and around 15 to 20 minutes per game for both of Stitt and Chapman. So just reliable guys that can come in and make a difference. But I think a really big loss, Jared, and this is where I'm going to end here with the Titans, and it's one individual that I've talked about over the years. It's Ricky Roth. He started in 24 games. He had 35 steals and led the team in assists with about 3.2 per game. So that doesn't sound like a lot, but everybody else was either in the 1s or low 2s in assists per game. And Ricky Roth, every game that I announced, it seemed like he knew exactly where the ball was supposed to go. He found the open man, and guys like Dylan O'Hara, Blake Payne, Stamatiadis, and Daniel Ritter as well, they were open, and Ricky Roth found them. And his defense was huge. 35 steals. He was everywhere on the court. He was so much faster than everybody else, and he thought of the game in a very unique way. And his IQ level for basketball was through the roof. And I think that's going to be a sneaky loss for them when you have somebody who can facilitate the way he does, can play defense as stout as he did, and sort of have that intellect, almost like having a coach on the court. That's going to be sorely missed by the Titans. But of course, as always, they need to step up.
Well, here's one thing about Westminster. For the last few years, they've always been one of the more exciting teams to watch out on the court. And yes, you see the list of losses, and it's pretty long, but they usually do a pretty good job of replenishing the supply up there as well. So I would look for them to still be an exciting team out on the court. They have a couple of good players coming back. So I think with that, on top of any younger talent that they could fit into the lineup, they'll be in good shape. Speaking of the Bearcats, we mentioned an interesting season for them. They're not used to being in the middle of the pack. They're used to being on the top. And Jared, tell me how the Bearcats can get back up into the top of the PAC. Well, it's going to be a tough uphill battle for sure. As you said, it was a roller coaster season, 13-14 last year. Head coach Terrence Smith taking over and having to fill some big shoes, but did a decent job. Of course, this is his 7th year now with St. Vincent overall, and he was also a player there. So he knows the atmosphere. He knows the culture that the Bearcats bring in. And I think he eventually, when he gets his players in there and ready to go, will become a very, very good coach in the PAC. But he's going to have to overcome a lot of losses. You know, their key losses start with David Stephen, a guy who over the past few seasons has been one of the best players, 1,000-point scorer, a 2-time all-conference, averaging about 16 points a game, 5 rebounds per game. Stephen entered the transfer portal in the end of the spring, and because of that, he's not on the roster anymore, as well as a couple of other players, including Andrew Reed and Cletus Helton, 2 guys who I remember distinctly as key contributors in pretty important matchups against Chatham at the end of the year last year. Kyle Pope and Josh Duda are also lost. Duda to graduation. He was one of the leaders of the team last year. So because of that, it's a laundry list of people that they don't have returning. That's going to be tough for them. There's a lot of young players on this team. As we look at it, the breakdown, 12 freshmen, only 4 sophomores, no juniors. Where you think about it, your junior class, you usually see a lot of good contributing talent in that age level, but no juniors and only 4 seniors returning. But there are some good key returners. That's a good thing to talk about. The first one that pops off the page for me is Shamar Bennett, who started in 19 games last year, or rather played in 19, started in 17. He led the team in blocks, a pretty big force down low. Drew Normandin is another one who played in all the games and started in most of them, leading the team in rebounds down low with 172 last year. And Walter Bonds is another key returner. He had 10-plus points in 6 games last year. If he gets that moving up, and I think he will, as he started in most of the games last year, I think he will be the starter in every game this year. Because of that, they still have a chance to be a talented team and a team that could go and find themselves, as you mentioned, every team's going to make the PAC tournament, but maybe could be a surprise in the PAC tournament if they get things together. The biggest key is going to be, what are they going to be able to do with that young talent? Because there's a whole lot of freshmen on this team. Is anybody from that class going to be able to step up? We'll see. You know, it's not a guarantee. We'll have to go and look and see exactly how it's all going to play out for head coach Terrence Smith, who, as I mentioned, is entering his 2nd season as the head man there in Latrobe. So we'll see exactly how it goes. It could be another roller coaster campaign, though, just depending on how it goes. I think what's going to play into their benefit, you have less games this year. And because of that, everything's going to matter. And I think because of that, you're going to see teams like this who maybe are counted out, you know, especially in games against better opponents, step up. Usually that's what you see a lot. And because of that, I think that they're definitely not going to be, you know, any sort of a basement dweller by any means. Usually St. Vincent can at least roll out something that's going to be at least competitive most of the time. So I'm looking for that out of the Bearcats this year. So we'll see what goes.
Yeah, I mentioned it to Donnie in the first show because we were talking about the women's team. There's something about St. Vincent. You just can't count them out at all.
No.
Men's, women's side, it doesn't matter.
You're right.
They're always going to be competitive. They have a lot going against them this year, but, you know, with the amount of incoming freshmen they have, the facility that they have, and, you know, just the support that program gets, I could see them still competing. And you mentioned it, the lack of games and, you know, the condensed schedule and everything that plays into that helps some of those teams that may not have the best roster heading into the season as far as, you know, outside looking in. But moving on now, we'll talk about the Geneva Golden Tornadoes, who were 14-14 overall and 8-8 in the PAC. And I'm not quite sure if I would call them a Cinderella story, Jared, but they're about as close as you can get last year in the PAC. So they made it to the PAC championship, as you mentioned. They lost 86-70 to a very good Grove City team, which we will cover later on. They were outscored in that game 48-35 in the first half. They made it competitive in the second half, but you know, that first half really drained that team. And Grove City is just so talented defensively that it was tough for them to sort of get things going in that championship game. But they beat W&J 79-77 and Chatham 91-63 to get to the championship. And a really important thing for the Golden Tornadoes is that they had a lot of losses coming into this season, which we will get to, but they added 8 freshmen. So that's the most on my list so far, as far as additions to the team. But they're going to be led by one of the better freshmen in the PAC last year, Lyle Tipton. The kid was fantastic. He had 9 points per game, 43% from the field, and 86% from the free throw line. He was one of the best free throw shooters in the PAC. But if that last name rings a bell, Jared, he is a brother to Lauren Tipton, who is the ultra talented senior on the women's side, who scored 40 points in a game against Teal. And her brother had a sensational game against Teal in the men's matchup following that. So it was kind of interesting to be on the call for that, to see both the Tiptons sort of, go off in back-to-back games. But, he's a guy that is, talk about great facilitators. He can pass. Obviously, he can shoot well, but he sees the court almost similarly to what we were talking about with Ricky Roth. I mean, he sees it in a way where you couldn't imagine a freshman seeing it. I mean, I know, coming from high school, obviously he had a lot of playing time, but I mean, college, regardless of the level, it's a completely different animal. And he was able to make that transition seamlessly. And he didn't get a ton of playing time right off the bat in the first few games, and then sort of earned his way and was extremely important for them. So look for Lyle Tipton to make a big impact this year. They also have Joel Stutz, who will be making his return here for the Golden Tornadoes, averaged about 28 minutes per game, 8 points per game, 40% from the field and 35% from beyond the arc. So he's a guy that can shoot. He's going to be relied on, and Tipton's going to be looking for him for sure, especially in the corners. And another individual who stands out, and I've been on his bandwagon since high school, has been Amos Loptak. He's a gritty guy. He has a lot of skill. Also the Geneva quarterback, coming from Quaker Valley, did at first go to Washington and Jefferson, but transferred to Geneva. Averaged about 8 points per game, 39% from the field, 72% from the line, and second on the team in assists. So, he's just a fun athlete to watch, both football and in basketball. And, I would compare him to a Matt Popek, maybe not as pure of a shooter, but as far as the skill and just pure athleticism from a smaller point guard, he's going to be stepping into his own this year and taking a really important leadership role, as he did on the football team. He's going to have to come in and replace some of the seniors that they lost, and be a leader on this team. And I think he will. Another really big return is Matt Bainovich. This kid is money from beyond the arc, Jared. Absolute money. 7 points per game, but 46% from 3-point range and 86% from the line. I mean, this guy makes the big shots. When he's open in the corner, it's automatic. I mean, he's going to make that shot. One of the best 3-point shooters in the PAC coming into this year. And I think that if he would have seen a little bit more playing time last year, I think those numbers would have been a little bit better. But now this year, with some of the losses that they have, he's going to be super important to this team. But mentioning the losses that he did have, obviously Ethan Moos is going to be huge for them. 16.5 points per game, led the team in assists with 3 per game, and also on the team in rebounds, averaging just under 9 rebounds per game. They also lost Noah DiMazzo, who was a stud, great facilitator, 12 points per game, could shoot the ball. And then they also are losing a big down low in Nick Russin, 9.5 points per game, averaged about 6 rebounds per game as well. So, this team is losing a few key pieces, but overall, with the skill that they have, pure athleticism and the shooters, I think maybe playing the game between the blocks might be a little bit of a struggle for them this year. But if they can find those open shooters, it's going to be tough to beat.
Yeah, for sure. That's a team actually that I didn't really get to see much until the championship game last year. And it was just exciting that they were in that championship game. And, the hope is that they can go and make another run, maybe be up there in the standings as well again, and show that they can return back to the championship. We'll see what goes.
Well, Jared, it's now time to welcome the newest member of the PAC, Franciscan, the Barons. They're coming in. We don't know too much about them. Now, fortunately, the PAC and the conference that they were in, it's escaping me at the moment.
That's the AMCC is what they were in.
Yes. So they often had matchups. I mean, they played, I think, 2 or 3 PAC teams last year, and it seems like in years past they've met them in the ECAC tournament. So we're not unfamiliar with the Barons, but we don't know much about them. You need to enlighten everybody about Franciscan.
Well, they could be coming in making some noise. It's just important to note. And as you mentioned, we'll be talking about Grove City coming up here in just a couple of teams. But they actually beat the champions last year in the regular season by 10 points, 78-68. Now, granted, that was a non-conference game. It was early on in the season, but that has to give them a little bit of confidence coming into this season. I don't think that that would go and make things, they're going to go and want those challenges coming in, as you mentioned, the Barons new to this conference. Now, they graduated 6 seniors, including 3 starters. That included Matt Trent and John Noss. So we'll see exactly how they'll go and return from that. But they do have a lot of returning leaders, which is good, including Sean Hickey, Travis Lien, 2 players who played in most of the games last year. They were stat leaders in most categories out of all of the returners. Hickey, he played in 23 or 25 games, started in 23, averaged 15.5 a game, 40% from 3-point land, and then 83.5 from free throw. So if you're going to go and as you mentioned, and Geneva had a player that was pretty consistent both beyond the arc and from the free throw line, Sean Hickey's going to be up there and doing some damage as well. What's very interesting, since Franciscan has become a Division III program, Hickey now has 974 points, which is the 3rd most since Franciscan has been in the Division III era. So he's looking, obviously, with a slate and a season coming up here, he's looking to potentially get to 1,000 points for sure. Limited games to do so, but, that's still going to be a decent opportunity to at least eclipse the 1,000-point mark. So we'll be watching out for that throughout the season. Junior Justin Mack is another key returner. He was a backup point guard last season that averaged about 36% from the 3 land. Meanwhile, Joe Vernal had 11 starts last year. Dalton Davis, these are both seniors, had 16 games played last year, and they're both strong and consistent from the front court. So we'll see both of them in the front court, and they should be key contributors. Meanwhile, Jonathan Ziegler is a man who returns after 3 seasons of battling injury. So if he's fully healthy, he'll also be there in the Barons' arsenal as well. So their first game, pretty good matchup for them. They do have to go on the road, but it's not that far away. They only have to go to Bethany. So Steubenville to Bethany, that's a 1:00 start, and that's going to be on this upcoming Saturday, the 23rd. So we'll see exactly how everything shakes out. But I would look for Franciscan to make some noise in the standings, being that they were a pretty solid team last year after 12 seasons in the AMCC. They move over to the PAC full-time for basketball and multiple other sports. So we'll see exactly what goes with Franciscan.
Yeah, it seemed completely unknown, but as you mentioned, we've seen him here and there throughout some of the matchups in years past, especially in the ECAC tournament. So we're just excited to have them on board here. Ever since the loss of Thomas Moore, I know this conference was looking for another member, and they found a good one in the Barons. So we're excited to cover them and for them to be part of this great conference. Moving on now, we'll talk about the Chatham Cougars, 17-10 overall last year, 11-5 in the PAC, led by the bench boss, David Richards, who's done a really great job with this program. Whenever they first kind of got started, since they were an all girls school at first, and then allowed men, and then men's sports really took off for Chatham. It was a band of brothers at first. These guys came in as freshmen, and we saw them develop, and each year they got better and better, and they're not here anymore. They've graduated and moved on, but now the recruiting class of now, this program is starting to get a lot of really great talent. And the Cougars on both the men's and women's side are just an exciting team to watch, because they can shoot threes, and they're aggressive. It seems like both styles, fit to what we like to watch and announce. And this has always been an exciting team to cover. But they lost last year in the semifinals, as we mentioned before, to Geneva, 91-63. So a pretty tough loss for them. But Geneva was on full display in that game. They don't have a roster at this time, Jared. So these are just players that we are expecting to return from last year. But this was a team that limited the turnovers, but caused many for opponents. They averaged about 16 turnovers a game and about 7 steals. So one of the key losses was Will Sandher last year, and we'll get to him. But, it seemed like him and a few other, Chatham Cougars, I mean, they were unbelievable defensively, and you could not get into their end. And they were aggressive. They played the game the right way, and it was tough to score against them, which kind of led to that defeat to Geneva, allowing 91 points. A little surprising, but they're looking to right the ship this year. And really, their only key loss is Will Sandhill, but it is an important one. He averaged just under 16 points per game, 6 rebounds per game, and close to 3 assists per game as well, and a stud defensively. As we remember, Will Sandhill initially went to St. Vincent and then moved on to Chatham, and we covered the game, his first game against St. Vincent, and he beat them. And it was really cool to see that moment because, he worked really hard at St. Vincent, of course, didn't get a lot of playing time, then went to Chatham and was able to beat them on Chatham's home court. So, he will definitely be missed, but they're led by Malik Potter, who's going to be a really important piece to this team this season and moving forward. Just under 13 points per game, 27 minutes per game, 43% from the field, and also had a pretty solid 3-point shooting percentage at 41%. Brandon Laverne is also going to be a really interesting piece to see, in my opinion, because he only played in 5 games last year, but he started those, and we played in those 5 games, but he was really only active for those 5 games. But averaged around 12.4 points per game and 24 minutes per game in those 5 games that he played. And he's 38% from the field and averaged about 3 assists per game. So we didn't see much of him, but now this year he's going to have a lot of opportunity to shine, to shoot the 3 ball, to play the right way, and to be that facilitator as far as in the assist department, because he needs to kind of pick up where Will Sandhill left off. And I think he's going to do that. Limited action last year, of course, those numbers might be a little bit gaudy because he didn't have much playing time, but this year he's going to make a huge impact for this team. And so will Marcus Centrone. I mean, averaged just under 12 points per game, 38% from the field and 37% from 3-point range. Elijah Sutton's also someone to look out for as a freshman, averaged just under 10 points per game. And they had a lot of youth that came through last year. They had flashes of being a really, really great team. Only 5 losses in the PAC. They played well together. And that's the one thing about Chatham, Jared, that has been evident over the last few years, is that they may not have the one guy or the 2 guys that sort of light up the score sheet, right? I mean, they're not, they're not averaging 20 to 25 points per game or 19 points per game, but they just play well as a team and as a unit. And their defensive structure helped them out a lot last year, and their shooting, their competitiveness. I think that's going to continue this year, but we'll see how that youth can develop. Obviously, not losing very many, but as they're evolving from freshmen to sophomores into juniors, how can they take that next step to being elite?
Yeah, as you mentioned, they lost their core that ended up winning a PAC championship against Westminster a few years ago. And because of that, they had to rebuild. But even though they had to rebuild, they were still very competitive. I mean, a beautiful record with 17-10. You'll take that, being in the top 5 in the conference last year. And as you mentioned, they had that pretty establishing win over St. Vincent. I think I was actually on that call, and it was just a whole. They bring a great atmosphere at Chatham. That's one thing. Unfortunately, there won't be fans to start, but hopefully at some point, whether it be come PAC tournament time, there's at least a few people allowed in. That's a part of going to play there. It's one of my favorite gyms to actually broadcast from in the PAC, and they usually bring a pretty good brand of basketball as well. So I'm excited to see what they're going to do this year as well. And
another place where I like to announce games, and if this team is going, their fan base is loyal, and that's the Bethany Bison. That place can get loud. You've seen some very athletic basketball players come from that program. Not the season that they really wanted last year. How are they going to be able to turn it around this year, Jared?
All right. So with Bethany, unfortunately for them last year, I think they didn't exactly have the roster they were looking for. They were 4-21 last year, so they end in the bottom of the PAC standings. But it doesn't mean that they're all like, that they can't turn around. by any means. They did have some key losses, including Aiden Albert to graduation, Trey Shiflett as well, who played in 20 games and had 8 starts. But there's a couple of key returners. As you mentioned, only 4 wins. Only 3 of them against PAC opponents, Waynesburg, Teal, and Chatham. So Chatham is a decent win for them. Waynesburg and Teal were sorted towards them in the standings, so you were hoping that you were going to get a win from at least one of the 2, if not both of them. And then the other win was non-conference against Emory and Henry very early on in the season. So the key returner for me is Derek White Jr., who was in 25 games. He started 24 of them and had 10 points or more in 10 of the contests that he played in. Averaged about 7 per game with 5 rebounds and 4 assists. He's going to have to lead the way in his junior season. Meanwhile, Nishan Brown, number 10, also played in all 25 contests, started 17. He averaged about 5 points, 3 rebounds per game. And then Dylan Furlong is another one who was in every game, had only 11 starts, but is a name that I remember distinctly last year as a player that stood out for me. So the breakdown of the roster coming into this one, just 4 freshmen, so not too many new faces that haven't been with the team. The sophomore class, the biggest out of them all, with 6, the 3 juniors and 2 seniors. Overall, though, very small roster size. So head coach Nick Hager in his 6th season is going to obviously have to deal with maybe getting everybody involved to try to go and build on their campaign from last year. I could see this team winning more than 4 games coming into it. But again, the X factor is going to be, what are those 4 freshmen going to bring to the table? And then is your sophomore class going to step up, as including Nishan Brown, who I think will have a better campaign this year than last year. And then Derek White is going to be your leader as a junior. So Bethany, as we mentioned, they're going to face Franciscan at home to start the season, which that could be a good first game to get started on for them as they want try to turn the tide out there in West Virginia.
Yeah, and the youth, they lost a lot of key pieces, either to transfer to graduation the year before last. And
right.
And I think this program is going to, it's slowly but surely going to creep their way up. I don't foresee them sort of taking the PAC by storm, but each season, each game is going to be a building block for them. And our last team that we have to discuss is the PAC champions from last year. And I don't think that, looking at it now, they're going to need any luck this year. I think they're still going to be right there in the thick of things. They have a couple key losses, but the Grove City Wolverines, it seems like first and foremost, it's defense, Jared. That's something that's been instilled in the women's side and the men's side. They play a structured game. And I think last year, the talent that they had exploded towards the end, and we'll mention some of those players returning here that are going to be key contributors this season that had a fantastic run in the tournament a year ago. But as you mentioned, they won the PAC championship last year. They beat Geneva 86-70. They beat Teal in the quarterfinals 76-62. And in the semis, they had a very close game against St. Vincent. And again, it seems like even when the Bearcats have somewhat of a down season, or they're not going the way that the season isn't going the way that they thought, they're still a competitive team that can certainly force some issues for some of the better teams in the PAC, especially last season. And that was a tough win, but clearly the best team won as they won the championship in the end. But they added 6 freshmen. They were outscoring in every category, outscoring opponents in every category, every single game. So scoring, shooting, rebounding, assists, turnover, steals, and blocks. They dominated everybody per game. And obviously, if you looked at that on the outside looking in, you could tell that they were a favorite for the PAC championship. And, as we keep talking about, clearly they won. But they were led by Nate Peters and James Wells last year. Those 2 will be moving on. Nate Peters, just under 15 points per game, 52% from the field, and led the team in steals with 2 a game. So they're losing a guy who contributed offensively, but defensively was sort of the quarterback of that team. He was one player towards the end, Jared, where if there was an important shot, an important pass, or important play defensively, he was your guy, and you counted on him a veteran. The leadership was on full display, and so was James Wells. A very athletic big man down low that can shoot the ball. That's something that you don't often see with the big guys, is the fact they can push it back out past the line and shoot it from deep. So they're about 14 and a half points per game for Wells, 6.1 rebounds per game, but 44% from the field and 36% from 3-point range. So as we look at it as a whole, maybe not the most impressive mark, but having a big that can play down low, can dunk. We've seen a few dunks from him. Always exciting to announce at the PAC, but then he can kick it back out and shoot the three. And I think that was a key for them, because teams didn't really know how to match up. They didn't know if he was going to come in between the blocks or take a couple steps back and shoot the deep ball. So, but returning is one of my favorite players in the PAC, is Justice Rice. One of the reasons why is, he may not know this, but I announced his championship win in the WPIL whenever he played for Monessen. And I think he was a guy that blew me away whenever he was in high school. Averaged about just under 13 points per game. Last year, team leading 3 assists per game, 49% from the field and 31% from 3-point range. So, he's a guy that I think he was highly, he wasn't recruited very highly, his campaign in high school, but I think that, he's proving himself here as a very talented college athlete for the Grove City Wolverines, and they got a steal having him coming to that program. He was top 3 in scoring on the team during the championship run. And another very important piece returning is Eric Miners, 8.6 points per game, 44% from the field and 41% from 3-point, and 80% from the foul line. So he's a guy that can come in and get you the key points, can shoot well from the field, great shooter from beyond the arc, and won't miss very often from the foul line. And another big returner is Joe Miola. So he'll kind of sort of take that spot where James Wells was, a really important piece between the blocks, 6.5 points per game, 6 rebounds per game, 45% from the field, and not as much of a 3-point threat as we saw from James Wells. But if he somehow, some way develops that into his game, a mid-range or a long-range shot, watch out, because this team has a lot of key returners, some great freshmen, some good depth guys. They lost a very talented point guard and Nate Peters, and a very talented big man, one of the best in the PAC, and James Wells. But if this team can sort of find that formula, be stout defensively, as they have been throughout my, this existence in the PAC and covering these teams, I think they'll still be in the thick of things and still one of the favorites heading into this season.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely are the class of the conference. I don't think that, at least in men's basketball, women's too, you think about it, they had a lot of young players and had a very, very talented squad over on the women's side of things as well. But just when you're going to Grove City, for a game, you're going to see a great matchup, and that they're most likely going to bring their all to the court. And I think, as you mentioned, Rice and Miola stand out the most to me. As players who are going to have to step up. They were obviously major contributors last year, but you lose your leadership, and I think they could step into those roles and very nicely. They're going to have talent. Their coaching staff and the way that they're built is going to lead them to being one of the top teams again here in 2021, even though it is just a shortened season.
Right. It's the history. It's the tradition. It's the expectation now for Grove City, who has had their athletics last year really exploded. So it's a place to be. If you want to get on the Division III level and have a really competitive program, this is a place to be. So that'll help them moving forward, especially with the championship win. Bringing in players, that's one of the most important things that this kind of goes. We don't really talk about it as much, but the more you win, the more you can bring in, and the better you can bring in, and the more you can kind of show the program off as, hey, we're a winning program. You need to join us. So I think that speaks for itself, and I'm sure they're going to have sustained success moving forward. But Jared, that does it for us here on the second and final episode of the 2021 PAC Basketball Preview Show. Thank you, Jared, for joining me today, and thanks to PAC owner Randy Gore, Commissioner Joe Andurko, and Donnie Chedrick for your contributions on our first episode. But although we are saying goodbye from our at-home studios, be sure to stick around as we showcase our PAC Network's 10th anniversary video. Reliving 10 years of great PAC basketball moments starts right now.
The following is a 10th anniversary presentation of the PAC Sports Network.
Leaves it for Kett, slam it home. Giesler, three, Giesler wins it at the buzzer.
Loptak to inbound, Moos, turnaround jumper, no, Rockman makes it count.
Sander loses the handle, gets it back, throws it up and in.
15 on the game clock. Dishes, jump shot, got it. 1 second, half-court shot, Dindak hits it.
A little bit of razzle-dazzle there on the fast break.
Jones, alley-oop, Rudolph with the dunk. To play, Vrabel takes the shot off the rim, rebound, Vrabel, shot goes! Throws it across to Clavin, drives, throws it up, got it at the buzzer, and the Jackets win!
Moves in, kicks it out to Burton, his shot from three. Tyreek Burton hits it with 1 second left.
Pushes it, Moore through traffic, throws it up, she's fouled and she got it to go! And Beckman, the tip-in is good! Do you believe it, the upset at the buzzer? He's already delivered one walk-off base hit in this championship tournament, that to beat Grove City. Can he do it again with the bases loaded in the 10th? And Lamed hits one to deep left center field, that'll chase the center fielder Mitchell to the fence, and it's gone!
Oh, my word.
A walk-off grand slam for Thomas Moore, and it's a 16-12 final.
And Williams fires it in! Anna Williams.
W&J sticking with it, keeping the heat on. Fetterman shot and a goal.
Dodge.
Oh, the dodge! Who else? D'Amico with number 7. High fly ball, right center. Outfielders converge. Gercio underneath it, makes the catch. And the W&J Presidents, the PAC champions.
11-year odyssey back to the top of the President's Athletic Conference for Westminster has culminated. The Titans are PAC champions 2019.
We have a spinning shot. Wow, what a beauty. Number 5 for Henry Brennan.
Roller on the left side. Two hopper fielded by Miller. Throw to first on a hop in time. And the St. Vincent Bearcats, the 2019 PAC softball champions. Pass right corner, intercepted by Bethany. Intercepted in the right corner of the end zone, and the Bison gonna hang on for the win. Pell keeps it, stiff arm, has the 10-5, touchdown. Grove City Wolverines win the Mercer County Cup.
Come on, catch it clean. Follow. Good job. Go at them. They're not going to stop you.
Way to make the push. Way to make the push. Way to make the push.
And you got to quarterback everybody else. And the guy's coming across the... Yeah, exactly.
Team on 3. 1, 2, 3. Team.
Your ball game. The St. Vincent Bearcats are the PAC champions. Fly ball left center, long run, outfielders converge. Shulo makes the catch. That's your ball game, and W&J going to the College World Series for the first time in program history. King for three. Knocks it down, Damian King.
The roof is about ready to pop off of the Connor Convocation Center right now.
And the St. Vincent Bearcats will win their first title in PAC women's basketball. Three, good from the far wing. Grove City has won the President's Athletic Conference Women's Basketball Championship for the first time since 1987.
For the first time since 2010, the Grove City Wolverines are the champions of the President's Athletic Conference.
The proceeding has been a 10th anniversary presentation of the PAC Sports Network.